Hello everyone, today I'll be showing you how to make a few damaging status effects using the combat variant. When we attack, we have poison, which will apply damage after a small delay, and subsequent hits will refresh the duration of the effect. Bleed will stack damage over time, with more bleed stacks causing more damage. Stacks will diminish over time if no more applications of the status is applied. Burn will factor in environmental damage over time as well as the attacks that cause the status, but damage will be mutually exclusive so both effects won't be active at once, and leaving a field of fire will continue to burn the player over time. And the last status effect will allow the player to reflect some damage back to the attacker when hit. All these can be mixed and matched as you see fit, so let's dive in. So here I have a new project, but I've added a few things just for the sake of the tutorial. I have a damage text widget that's going to be applied when I do damage, so then when I hit the enemy you'll be able to see how much damage is actually being applied. And it will also be able to change the color depending on our status effects, so we'll see which one actually is affecting the enemy. And I also have an overlay, so then when I activate it, you'll see a highlight on the character that will tell you this is the status effect that is going to be applied. I'll have a link to both of those in the description, and that will also be included in the project. So to get started, we're going to be making an enumeration file that's going to hold all of our status types. So in the content drawer, you can right-click and type in enumeration. And we'll call this E_status types. It's always good to have a none or a default value. And the status effects that we're going to be worrying about today is going to be poison, bleed, burn. This ability I'm going to call Thorns. Whenever we take damage, we deal a little bit damage back to our enemy. And for the next video, we'll have slow, stun, and sleep. And we'll also add confusion. To get the status effects applied, we can leverage the use of our BPI damageable interface that comes with the combat variant. And we'll add a new function called apply status. I'll have two inputs. The first is going to just be a boolean with the same name, so apply status. Even though we have a none, I find that it's a bit neater just to have the boolean. And the other is going to be a status type of E_status types, what we named our enumeration file. Then we can compile and go to our combat enemy. And in the interfaces, we'll double click on apply status. We're going to get a branch. And off of our status type, we're going to switch on E status types on true. So this will be the event that receives the status effect. So in our combat character, we want to go to where we're dealing damage off of our event do attack trace. After we do the multi-sphere trace on the attack and after the for each loop, we'll get the hit actor and call the message for apply status. Then we'll promote apply status after we check it to be true. And also promote the variable for our status type. And then you can activate it similarly to how I do here. When I press 1, we're going to set the status type poison, and that will be our first. I'll say if I press 0, we can either set the status to none, or we could set apply status to be false. So poison, bleed, and burn are effectively going to be the same thing. It's going to be a timer that deals damage at an interval. However, there's a lot more that needs to be wrapped around it, and this is also a good time to think about how we want these abilities to functionally work different from one another. So I want to say for poison, we have an application that has a short delay, and after that delay, the actor starts taking damage. If we hit the actor again while the poison effect is on the actor, we're going to refresh the duration. So we'll get an event. We'll call it poison. We'll set a timer by event. We'll say every 1 second looping, and we're going to get an initial start delay of 2 seconds. Then we'll drag off the event and create a new custom event, and this will be our poison proc. Then after that, it's just simply apply damage. Damaged actor will get a reference to self. We'll keep the base damage as 1. And this is the core of it. So because we're using this in a combat variant where we can have multiple successive hits, every time we hit the actor with poison, we don't want to be starting the timer because that's just going to start it over from the start. So we need to promote the return value to a variable, and we'll call it the poison timer. So we need to first check to see, is this timer active by handle? And put it on a branch. So then if it's not, then we start it. Then to have our effect refresh, we need to use a retriggerable delay, which does exactly what it says it does, and we'll set that to be 5 seconds. Then after that, we want to clear and invalidate our timer by handle. And every time the combat enemy takes damage, it's set so then the physics blend weight changes. So this is only an effect that we need to change on this variant specifically. We need to set the physics blend weight. Back to 0. So then when the character is taking damage, we'll actually see the mesh sort of slouch. And then when the effect is over, it'll go back to the normal upright position. So if this is already running, we're going to reroute the true value to our retriggerable delay. However, to start damage, we're waiting a total of 3 seconds for our 1 second time and 2 second delay. So if we were to hit them twice, we would effectively immediately go to the retriggerable delay, and then that would leave us 2 seconds of dealing damage before this timer runs out. So we need to get another delay, and we also need to set it so then this doesn't start refreshing until after our initial 3 seconds are over. So to do that, we need to get a new Boolean. And we could just call it poisoned, or stacked poisoned, or something to that effect. And we need to get a branch after our poison timer. And we'll check to see if this condition is true or false. So after a 3 second delay, or however long you want to have the total time it takes to start dealing damage, we will set poisoned to be true. Then we can connect that to the retriggerable delay. Then we're going to check our true value. If our character is already poisoned. Every time we try to apply the poison effect before that 3 second duration is over, is effectively not going to do anything. But after the poison starts taking effect, we can refresh the duration immediately by going to a retriggerable delay. So to show you how this works, just copy in my widget, set the return value to the text, and we'll change the color to green. Then we need to connect our poison. Now when I set up the overlay, hit the enemy, we start seeing the poison taking effect after 3 seconds. Then we're going to go to damage and set the max HP of our enemy to 50 so they don't die from just one proc. If we hit them again, it should stay poisoned for another 5 seconds. And that's pretty much that. So after we set the blend weight, though, specifically, again, for this project, the blueprint is set for the enemy to ragdoll, so if you don't want to have the actor go back to the blend weights, we can also just get a branch to check to see is the current HP of the character less than or equal to 0. That way when they do die, they won't become stiff as a board on the ground until they disappear. So that's our poison application. And wrapped in this, we're going to be doing pretty much the same with our bleed. However, with bleed, we're going to change it so then rather than just refreshing the duration, we want to increase the damage that is done by stacking bleed. So we'll have up to 5 applications of bleed, and then after a certain amount of time, those applications will start bleeding off one by one until we get to 0 damage, in which case the effect ends. So we could effectively copy our timer. We'll rename the custom event to bleed, timer event to bleed proc, initial start delay will set back to 0, promote this return value so we have a new timer for our bleed timer, and swap out the poison timer on our handle. And we can also copy our retriggerable delay, and we'll keep that at 5 seconds. So to stack the damage, we'll promote our base damage on the applied damage to a new variable, and we'll call it bleed damage. Set the default value to 0. And we're going to pause right here for a second and go to the other side of our retriggerable delay. Because we need to get a means of checking this condition to see if this is greater than 1. Then we will simply decrement the float. Otherwise, we could take our bleed timer and we can clear and invalidate the timer by handle. And on our application, we're going to first get a branch. And we're going to check to see if our bleed damage is less than 5. Because we're starting at 0, and then we're going to increment this on true. Whatever number you set here is going to be the max number of stacks you want to add of the effect. And we can also copy the same thing I did up here with the blend weights. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So when we increment the float, if we were to connect it here, same thing if we have the bleed timer, we don't want to keep applying a poison and then restarting this timer. So we would route around to the retriggerable delay. But then after we do the retriggerable delay, we basically lose control of the logic. So if we were to decrement this, wait a second, go back into the branch, that would decrement the bleed damage until we get to 0, in which case we clear the timer and end the effect, but we don't want to do that. We want it so then, even if we are after the delay, we want to still affect the logic that goes into this and stop it if we are actually applying more. So the way we do that is that we're going to get a gate. I'm going to connect the exit to our branch here. We can keep start closed, but we're going to be closing it every time we try to apply a new stack. So we're going to get a sequence. And our false pin will route around our increment, so then if we're going over 5 stacks, we don't add any more damage. If we did not get to the retriggerable delay, then what we can just do is route to it around our true condition for our timer. After 5 seconds, we're going to open the gate. But if we do apply more damage, we can route around with the sequence. And that will go and close the gate. And then for our enter, because we want this to tick down every 1 second, but we already have our timer at 1 second, we could simply just plug in the end of our bleed proc into enter. So go back up, and then we'll add bleed to our effect. And then on our combat character, we'll also add bleed on my overlay so we can activate it. And then I also need to change the color to red. So we can see it's still doing 1 damage. Hit again, goes up to 2 damage. 5 times, goes up to 5 damage. And we keep it alive. So burn is going to be pretty straightforward. Again, we'll copy what we did with poison. Change the event to burn. Then burn proc. We'll get a retriggerable delay for 5 seconds. We'll promote the timer to a new variable and call it burn timer. Though for this, when we apply burn, we're not going to be adding stacks, and we don't need to have a delay. So we're actually just going to do the most simple thing that we can, which is just rerouting off of true to re-trigger the delay, and then after the delay is done, we will clear and invalidate our burn timer. We'll set that up in our switch. Set that in our combat character. So now that's going to be the application of burn. But as simple as that is, we're also going to be adding an environmental factor to this, because fire is something that you can stand in, and this will also be something if you wanted to change poison to be in like a poison cloud, that every second that a player is in it, they take damage. You could also do the same thing with bleed, but we're going to make a new actor. We'll call it BP_burn zone. We're going to add a collision sphere. And I'm also going to add a Niagara effect that I had from another project. We'll drag it into our map. I'm going to place it right over the green sphere here. Close enough. So in the event graph of our burn zone, we're going to be applying burn to all actors that cross the threshold of our sphere. So we will get on component begin overlap. And then we're going to stop burning them when we get to the end overlap. Then we're going to trigger the burn event in the actor's blueprint. So then it applies burn while they're in the zone, and then they have that residual burn that's going to be carried with the character itself. So to keep track of all the actors that could be crossing this threshold, we'll make a new array variable. We'll call it burning actors of type actor. And switch it to an array. And we'll drag that in and add unique. So then whatever may happen. Sometimes I've seen that overlaps may trigger twice, so we just want to make sure that this only applies once to our character. So after something is crossing the threshold, they get added to the actors. Then after we start, we're going to set a timer by event. We're going to promote the return value to a variable as we've been doing for the same exact reasons. We'll call this one the burn timer. And we're going to see is active by handle. If it's not, then we'll just start the timer. We're going to want this running continuously through the level, so there's no real reason to get a delay to turn this off. We're effectively going to turn off the timer after everyone has exited the overlap. So we'll get a custom event, and this will be our burn proc for this actor. I'll set the timer to 1 second and looping. Then we're going to get a for each loop of our burning actors, and then we're going to apply damage off of the array element. We'll say fire is going to be 3 damage. I'm going to copy my damage text so then we can see this in the game. Then as we cycle through the actor, we're going to go through completed and check to see is our array empty. And if it is, we can clear and invalidate the timer. Then off of our end overlap, we're going to take the burning actors And we're going to remove the item of our other actor. Then off of our other actors, we're going to call the status effect. So we'll apply status as a message. We say yes, environmental type burn. So this will trigger within our actor. So I'm going to take burn and copy it over to our combat character, so then our player character can also be affected. Did not change that to burn timer. Now we'll also need to have the apply status effect added and copied in the same way that the combat enemy does. But we're just going to worry about burn. So if I walk into the fire, the character is taking damage, and then poor little guy gets tuckered out and takes a nap. Change the max AP of our player character to 50 as well. And I'm going to take the burn sphere and we're going to set hidden in game to be false so then we can see this. We can kind of dance in and out. And we're going to be applying multiple stacks of our burn, which we don't want. So we want to make sure that we only have this application of damage from our burn zone or the application of damage for our apply status effect. So I'm going to go back to our BPI damageable and we're going to add a new function. And this is going to be environmental damage. I'm going to add a new boolean. This one I'm going to say is in fire. You can do the same thing for any other status effect and add it here. So in our burn zone, we're going to send a message to our other actor. That we're going to be setting the in fire to be false. Then we're going to copy this and place it right after we add the actor to the array and set that to be true. Then we'll go to our environmental damage, double click to make the event. We'll connect that to a branch. And we can immediately just clear and invalidate the timer. We'll copy that and put that into our combat enemy as well. And I'm going to change the colors. Now, we have an issue where if we're dancing in between, we're canceling this. So to avoid that abuse, since this timer starts at 1, we can actually get an initial start delay at -1. So this timer will start immediately, so as soon as we cross the threshold, we start taking damage. Fire damage, then when we leave, will take the normal burn damage, and this will cancel the effect that we have on ourselves. However, if we were to go into the combat enemy and try to push him into the fire after applying, you'll see that he's taking burn damage after we hit him when he's already in the fire. And we want to prevent that from happening. So we'll go to our combat character. We'll go to our combat enemy first. And we'll promote the in-fire value to a variable. And every tick we're going to check to see if this is true, because we're only going to apply that when we enter the fire, and it's only ever not going to be true when we're out of the fire. So we'll get a branch. Select that to be on the false. And then we can reroute this to our clear and invalidate timer, making this branch a bit redundant, but that's fine to have. And we'll do the same thing with our combat character. So if we go back into the map, activate fire, we hit the enemy, they start taking fire damage, we push them into the fire, they start taking the normal fire damage. If we try to reapply the fire again, it's not going to take off of their burn, it's going to prioritize the burn from our fire field. You could ignore that error, that's because of the overlay. So now our fourth effect is going to be our Thorns proc. So we'll create a custom event. And this will just be the proc effect. And very simply, we're going to copy the apply damage. And just set that here. I'm going to change the color to something like yellow. In our combat character, we want to apply this specifically when we're taking damage. So off of our event apply damage, off of our other actor, to apply status, specifically for Thorns. Now, we don't want to necessarily have overlap here, so if we did set our status to Thorns, whenever we throw a punch, we're going to be hitting that Thorns proc. If we just left it as is, then even if we don't have the ability active, it's going to apply the effect. So we need to just make a little bit of room. First, we'll just get the status type. And it'll get equal enum. And we can just, as apply status, connect Thorns. So if we're not set to our Thorns status, we're not going to be applying this status. Then off of our attack action, since we already have apply status, we could go through and set apply status to none, and then set it to be true for everything else. So now when we activate Thorns, character hits us, and they're able to take that damage. And when we turn off the ability, they're not taking anything. Now, I will note that when the character is in that staggered state, it is because when we go to the combat enemy, we can see setting the physics blend weight back to 0 is on event landed because everything is configured. So then when we hit the actor, it applies an impulse. So what we might want to do is on event any damage. We can get a condition, or if that condition were true, we just immediately set the blend weight. Or we can even put a branch here, so then we're not starting this either, but I don't want to make more room. We'll take our Thorns proc, make a new variable. Let's call it reflected damage. Equals true. We apply the damage. We can set it to be false, and we'll get a little bit of a delay so we don't make a race condition with the other event. Then we'll say if our reflected condition is true, then when we activate our Thorns, they take the damage, but they don't end up sticking in that state. Thank you for watching the video. Part 2 will go through other non-damage statuses, and we'll be diving into the AI a bit to make the effects look good. I want to thank the pillars for their support: Winterberry Shark, K-Panic, Shay Alexander, and Wolfpaws, and a thank you to everyone else who has supported me as well. You're all awesome. Check out the Patreon and Coffee Shop for exclusive content, projects, animations, and so on, and if you like the video, let me know by liking the video. I don't need your validation, but YouTube definitely does. So with that, I wish you all a good day, and I hope you've been inspired.